What's up, you beautiful chuds, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very unrated, unfiltered, very honest conversations about something from the world of horror. And this episode obviously is no exception. We're talking about an absolute bloody childhood classic, and like I said, it's a movie that we watched so much growing up, or a lot of us did. It is sort of one of those sort of gems out there that not still everybody knows about, but then still to this day, people are picking it up now, finding it, and then going, oh, we fucking absolutely bloody love this movie, and so they bloody should. But obviously, we're talking about the Monster Squad. And with me, there's no one really better I could talk about this movie, because with me, for my guest today is Barry. Barry is the creator of Wolfman's Got Nards. A reference in the movie itself, and for once, I don't think I fucked the name up, which is normally what happens. Hi, Barry. How the devil are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. And obviously, I love talking about the Monster Squad. Always have, always will. And the main reason that I created my channel way back in 2011 was because of my love of the Monster Squad initially, because whenever I spoke to people, I assumed, just like the Goonies, I assumed that everybody heard of the Monster Squad until I got a little bit older, and I was like, oh, do you like the Monster Squad? And they're like, what the hell is that? I'm like, what do you mean, what's that? Then I found out that nobody knew what the Monster Squad was, and it made me feel disheartened. So I wanted to talk about horror films. I wanted to talk about the Monster Squad. Nobody knew about it. Nobody cared. So I created a YouTube channel so that I could share my love, not just for the Monster Squad, but for horror. And I called it Wolfman's Got Nards, so that anyone who came to the channel and told me, oh, I know the Monster Squad from Wolfman's Got Nards, just the actual name itself, then I knew they were a fan, or at least they knew about the Monster Squad. So I was able to determine if someone knew about it and someone didn't. And then obviously 12, 13 years later, here we are today. So it's good to come on and talk about the Monster Squad with someone who also knows about the Monster Squad, so that we can kind of get into a good discussion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And it's such a great way of doing it, because like you're saying, it's cool that you created Wolfman's Got Nards because, paying your respect and love to the movie itself. But what's cool about it is, like you said, it means that you know people who have seen the movie, but it also means that people who may not have seen that movie and like, what the hell is Wolfman's Got Nards? It educates them then on the fact of Monster Squad is a real movie. And I love the fact as well that you said that, because this is the struggles of being a Monster Squad fan, because once again, as a kid growing up, I was exactly the same. I've had the exact same thoughts in my head. I would speak to people who love the Goonies and films like that, and those sort of old school nostalgia 80s films with these kids, and obviously they're still even more popular now with things like Stranger Things and so on. And Monster Squad really is one of those movies that led the way for that as well. And also what we're talking about, and that's why I'm excited about talking about it, is that I feel like it did it in a different way as well. And that's what's really enjoyable about this movie. And also, as you get older, there's more things to respect about this movie with the way that it goes on plot and story, which, like I said, we're going to get all into. But yeah, very similar to you, the conversations that I've had to, like I said, educate people on what Monster Squad is who have never seen it before, and throughout my life. So it's nice that we're sort of in a moment now where it is sort of multi-platform and so on, and people can now find it. But it's cool that, obviously you're there for, like you said, 12, 13 years or so, going, right, well, Wolfman's Got Nards. If you know what it is, then that's cool. If you don't know what it is, then that's even better, because now you get to learn about it. So, that's really cool. But for those that do know, for those that don't know, the film was released in 1987. It was directed by Fred Decker. It is starring, I'm going to go through this as quick as possible because there's so fucking many people in this movie. It's ridiculous. So we've got Andre Gower as Sean Crenshaw. Also, as usual, anybody who listens or watches my show know that I'm a common Englishman who can hardly speak any words. And my anxiety most of the time doesn't let me. So all of these names will be completely fucking wrong. and I apologise for them already.
Well,
Andrew Gower,
I'm Scottish,
yeah,
so they wouldn't understand me anyway. So you're absolutely fine. Don't worry.
we're going to have subtitles on this episode because
Yeah,
not for you, but for me.
and me.
Yeah, that's it. But Robert Geiger, probably as Patrick Rhodes. Stephen Matched, never going to get that right, is Detective Del Crenshaw. Duncan Ryger, definitely wrong, as Count Dracula. Tom Noonan, that's a man that I definitely know as Frankenstein's monster. Tom Noonan, if you don't know, he also was in a lot of movies as well, such as The Last Action Hero, who's like the villain in Last Action Hero. He was in Ty West's House of the Devil. He gives a
Yeah.
fantastic performance in House of the Devil. In fact, it's one of the performances that I've got written on my favourite performances of all time list that I've got. Tom Noonan's great in that. He's somebody that pops up. Obviously, Manhunter as well. I think that's one of them. Basically, go on Google. You'll find a whole list of movies that this guy's been in. And every single time, brilliant. RoboCop 2 or 3, one of them. I can't remember which one. But he's in them as well. Brent Chalman as Horace. Ryan Lambert. I'm just going to say they are now. It's getting too long. Ashley Bank. Michael Faustino, good name. Tom Woodruff Jr., Michael Reed McKay, and John Grease, whatever. I call him Uncle Rico, or my daughter also calls him Uncle Rico because he plays Uncle Rico with a wig in Napoleon Dynamite, one of my favourite movies of all time. Not a horror, but he gives a shit. Obviously, there's loads more people in this. I'm not going to go through them all. On IMDb, it's 6.9 and 56% on Rotten Tomato. Obviously, that's bullshit. It deserves way more than that. Rotten Tomatoes, obviously, we know it's not exactly the most prestigious thing, but it deserves more than that. Google synopsis-wise, Count Dracula and other monsters, which is not very nice on the other monsters because they're still legendary, so they're not even bloody saying who they are on a hunt to seize an amulet that will grant them powers to rule the world. That is when the young boys Monster Squad reveals its devious plan to curb the evil. As usual, Google used a pretty shit synopsis, but that's what we're here. We're here to give a better idea of what the movie's all about, and obviously give our very in-depth, honest opinions of this movie. I'm sure this is going to be an episode that's going to be full of a lot of love for the movie and a lot of respect for it.
Yeah.
One thing that I always do on the show is ask my guests, if you can remember, when did you first see this movie?
For me, it would have to be the late 80s. I can't say exactly when. I'm guessing 1988, 89 possibly. Maybe late 89, I'd say, because it came out in 87 in the US. I don't think we even got it theatrically in the UK. I would have been too young anyway. So I didn't get to see it until cable TV or VHS video store rental. I did rent it a few times because, just like yourself, probably when we were watching movies growing up, they were on TV maybe once in a blue moon, and you wouldn't know when it would come back on unless you've got like the TV guide and you're constantly checking for it. So I would say late 80s, 1989, when I first saw this film, and it just kind of opened up a massive avenue for me in terms of horror and action adventure and stuff, because obviously we will probably do this throughout the episode quite a bit. We're going to compare it to the Goonies quite a lot, and that's what I did. I felt like, as much as I liked the Goonies and loved the Goonies, and I still do, and I feel like the Goonies is the better made film, but I felt like I could connect to the Monster Squad kids more because that was me. I was going out chasing monsters, so those were my types of kids, as well as feeling like those kids in the Monster Squad were a lot more realistic than the kids in the Goonies, because the kids in the Monster Squad would say things and do things that I would do at their age, whereas the Goonies were more polished in Hollywood style. So I could always resonate with the Monster Squad kids a little bit more than the Goonies kids. Again, we'll get into the Goonies probably more later on. But yeah, the Monster Squad for me, as early as I can remember seeing it in 1989, I would say, and it was on TV. And then after I saw it on TV, I would then go and rent it as much as I could from the video store. We had Global Video in Scotland. I'm sure you had it in England as well. And obviously Blockbuster Video. So I would rent it as many times as I could as a kid. Absolutely loved it for seeing it for the first time at least.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And I'm glad that you mentioned about obviously the Goonies and stuff,
Mhm.
and I'm really excited about talking more about this. Is do you know it's really funny because this is another movie that this happens quite a lot, and it's never something that I say to be disrespectful, but there's so many movies that always tend to live in the shadow of other movies,
Mhm.
and I always feel that Monster Squad is one of those movies, not in a bad way, but it still is one of those movies that, because it's lesser known than the Goonies, sometimes it lives in the shadows of, like you said, the more polished, the more Hollywood version of what
Yeah.
Monster Squad is. But I'm so excited about getting into the conversation about the movie itself, because this film, like you're saying, the themes within it as well, there's more layers to it. There's more layers to this movie in regards to character on multiple different age ranges as well, that is so really good about this movie, that it is timeless. Like, there's something about this movie that's incredibly timeless. So I first watched this video young as well. On mine was, so I've got this here as well. Anyway, I was going to show everybody. So the reason that I watched this movie is because of this, because
Yeah.
this to this day is still for me one of the coolest sort of artworks for posters. And if you were like a boy, you know, or a girl, you know, in the 80s, growing up in the 80s or the 90s, and you saw a bunch of kids just fucking like just chilling on a car, and it's called the Monster Squad and all that sort of shit, you're like, this is for me. Like, I want to watch this movie. And then you read more about it on the back of the VHS or whatever, and it's saying all this sort of stuff, and you're like, this is like a perfect movie. Like you're saying, it felt like that was what you were doing. It's sort of like how I get when I watch something like Stranger Things now. Like,
Mhm.
I got very nostalgic when I watched it, because I'm like, I was doing that shit. I was out on my BMX and skateboarding. I was like doing whatever I wanted, and then like I could probably get fucking kidnapped and no one would know about it. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, this was
Mhm.
our lives, like growing up in the 80s and 90s. So when I first watched the Monster Squad, straight away I was hooked. I absolutely loved it. Like yourself, rented it a few times, and then a little bit later on in my teens or so on, a little bit later, I can't remember what year it was, but they released the 20th anniversary, which I brought on DVD.
Mhm.
And then so on. The legacy's been there. But yeah, so mine once again was very young. I saw this after the Goonies, so I watched the Goonies, and then that's when I watched this, and they are the perfect back to back movie. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I love about these movies. You can watch the Goonies and then you can watch Monster Squad, or vice versa. I always prefer to watch the Goonies first and then go into Monster Squad, because some of the set pieces in this, which we'll talk about, are just so theatrical that it looks so good, and he's so much fun to watch, that it's like a really good midnight movie. That's what I
Yeah.
love about Monster Squad, even though people would think it's a kids movie, and it's not, or it is, and adults can love it so much. You can, it's like such a great midnight movie, or like a cult classic that it's become. And like I've said already, like, it's so good that we have it now and everybody can have access to it, unless you're like we've already mentioned in the UK, and we still haven't got a proper fucking release, which is why I'm stuck buying a shitty VHS. so so where to start with the movie? So this is always the interesting part, because obviously from this point onward, I haven't got a clue what I'm going to say, what we're going to talk about. So, and as everybody knows, these aren't edited, so the conversation is going to be what it is. And I think one of the cool places, well, let's just, right, okay, here's a run through of the movie. At the start of the movie, there's like, we're back in the past, and then there's an amulet, then there's Dracula, there's these things, all shit basically happens. This is going to be a shit synopsis, but it is what it is. And then and then we end up seeing obviously that these kids are basically they end up getting this book from like Van Helsing and so on like that, or is it Van Helsing? I think it's Van Helsing.
It's
I
Van
can't remember if
Helsing's
it's,
diary.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is Van Helsing, that's right. But basically other shit's going down, and basically all the stars are aligning, where Dracula and his monster friends, such as the Gill Man, creature from the Black Lagoon, you got Frankenstein's monster, you got the Mummy, all of these are coming together essentially to end the world and so like that, or create whatever world they want to. And then you've got these kids, the Monster Squad, are there to essentially try and stop it in different ways, and all the mischief that they get into. That's pretty much what the movie is. Pretty much.
Yeah, kind of.
Uh,
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, the It's that they need this amulet. Both sides, like the monsters and the kids, we need to keep the amulet so that they don't cause the end of the world. And it can, I think it's every 100 years that they're able to do this. So I think the beginning with Van Helsing's set in 1887 or something like that, and
Yeah,
then 100 years later, 1987 is when it happens again, and so on and so on. Everything else that you said, that
yeah,
the monster squad, the kids need to stop the monsters from ending the world. Basically, how great a story would that? Reading that on paper, kids band together to stop monsters ending the
yeah.
world. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm watching that right now. So good.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like we were saying, like it's like a dream for a kid movie. You know,
Yeah.
like you're like, I like because like when you're a kid, you know, you envision yourself doing these things. You're very impressionable,
Hmm.
and you sit there and you're reading stuff, and then as soon as it comes on, and obviously, you know, we're getting to this, but the soundtrack is so fucking good in this movie, and it just everything about this movie is it just doesn't get. It's different. I don't like saying things are underrated. Underrated isn't the word that I think, but obviously it's overused. I think it
Hmm.
like not being seen is the right way of putting it because
Yeah.
this is a movie. It's not underrated because people who watch it, I mean, love it. I haven't met anybody that doesn't love this movie,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
underrated isn't the right word. But it's not. It's underseen. It's not
Yes.
seen enough.
Underseen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's great, but there's so much joy in this movie. Like I recently, as if you know, we did recently did Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and that is another movie that brings you so much joy when you're watching it as a kid, but also as an adult, you're still stuck in that emotion of like,
Hmm.
God, this is fucking fun. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, so I think, well, let's start with let's go with the cast because there's a lot of things to talk about with this movie, and I always try and section little bits off because, as everybody knows, who if they listen or watch the show, they know that my brain is broken, and the way that I watch movies, I have like tick boxes going in my head. And for movies, for me to really truly enjoy them, they have to tick these boxes that are going on in my head. And Monster Squad is one of those things. So I like to try and separate stuff because it means you can really have like a proper discussion about certain aspects of the movie. And one of the reasons that I always like to talk about the cast or start with the cast as well, because this movie, the cast in this are absolutely fucking unbelievably good, like ridiculously good. This is a movie that like he's played incredibly straight. Like it's very rarely overly goofy. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't really. It's not a film that takes the piss out of itself. It's just for you as the viewer to sit there and go, "Well, that was fucking funny."
Yeah.
Nothing's really necessarily played too much for laughs. There is, but also at the same time, it is very, very funny. This movie.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think the performances are a really good place to start because obviously there's a lot of people in it, but if you separate them and so on, then the different layers of where it goes to, and obviously then it leads into talking about the story and so on. I think that's really interesting place to start. So if we're talking, let's start with the Monster Squad themselves. Now, you've got when we're first sort of introduced to a couple of them, they're in the principal's office where they've
Hmm.
drawn a picture of I can't even remember what it is, even though I saw it the other day. It's something monster with a head or something like that, and they have they have this amazing line in that scene where they're talking about like it's a picture of the teacher, I think it is,
Yeah.
and then the one of the kid like really politely turns around and says that the teacher's really nice, but they have like an odd shaped head,
Hmm.
and that cracks me up every single time. But we're introduced to those characters, and that's sort of the first sort of couple people you get. Like, obviously, you can sort of say Sean is like the Sean Astin, so to speak. He's sort of like the leader of the Monster Squad in a way, like Sean
Yeah.
Astin is
Yes.
like the
Hmm.
leader of, even though they all play the integral parts within the group. He's sort of like the Sean Astin, but yeah, you know, and they're just kids, but they're fun. And I really like what you said earlier on, where you feel like they're more real. You feel like you can connect with them more on a human level, or as a child. I really like that element that you said because you can connect with them a lot more in this movie than you probably can with the Hollywood version of the Goonies, so to speak.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I feel like I can connect to most of the character, most of the Monster Squad, or I feel like I know someone when I was a kid. I knew someone who was like each individual in the Monster Squad. And I think we can all relate, but we can all strive to be like them. Like we all want to be like Sean because he's the leader. He's the one that knows everything. We all want to be like Rudy because Rudy's the cool kid. He's got
And
the
he's a
leather
big perv.
jacket.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he's a cool kid that everybody wants to be like.
yeah,
Um, you want to have like a kind of jokey friend in the movie. So like Horace would be
yeah.
your kind of jokey friend. We've all got that annoying little sister who's Phoebe. Someone in the group's got an annoying little sister. Um, but we've also got one person that we all forget, and that is the person I'm forgetting, and that is his. I would call him the second in command. See the boy at the start with
Yeah,
Sean,
yeah, yeah.
played by Robbie Kiger. I know Robbie Kiger, but I can't remember who he plays. I can't remember his
It,
name.
I don't remember, but I've just looked. So it's Patrick. His
Patrick.
character is called Patrick.
Patrick.
But
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same as you. You can remember the others, but there's the one that you forget. But like you're saying, you're right. He is still such an integral part of the group. I mean, he's
Mhm.
the first one out of the group that you see
Yeah.
in the
Exactly.
movie, sitting in the office. You think that he's probably going to be the main one until it pans over
Mhm.
to Sean. But yeah, you're right. It's so cool to have this group, and you're right. I think it really nails the humanizing these kids.
Mhm.
And like you said as well, everybody always has the friend with the annoying sister. Well, what's fantastic about the performances in this is that none of these, including who could be the annoying sister, she is not annoying in this whatsoever. I mean, I don't find her annoying, but
No, no.
I just think all the performances from the kids themselves are so good in this movie that we've all seen them. We've all seen these movies that are so annoying because of the kids are so shit. Either they're annoying because they can't act, or they're annoying because they're overacting and they
Yeah.
don't get it and they're trying to stand out for the wrong reasons. No one's doing that in this. Like
No, so
everybody is
natural.
absolutely spot on.
Mhm. Yeah, especially Phoebe. And Phoebe was
Yeah,
only 4 years old when she filmed this,
yeah,
Ashley Bank. And there's a great scene with involving Phoebe and Sean where she tries to get into the clubhouse
yeah,
and he's like, no girls allowed. And she's like, that's prescription. And he's
yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
discrimination, but it's prescription that you're on if you think you're getting in here. And he slams the door on her. It's just so natural and funny. And even today, like 36, 37 years later, watching scenes like that, you're like, that's brilliant. They
yeah,
don't write
absolutely.
stuff like that so naturally these days. So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that as well, because after we've gone through the cast, that's one thing I want to talk about as well, is the writing in this movie as well, which
Mhm.
has a slightly sort of like famous screenwriter and a writer behind this as well. So we talk
Indeed.
about that, but yeah, so that the Monster Squad themselves, not only they're perfectly cast, they're played perfectly. Like you said, you've got everybody within that group that different people can take different things away. You've got the Joker,
Mhm.
you've got the leader, you've got the pervy cool kid. You've got, yeah, but you've got them. But then you've got the monsters themselves, and Duncan Ryger. Ray, I'm never going to get that name right.
Regeer. Duncan Regeer.
Look at that. There's no way I'm getting
It's
that.
because I met him. I met Duncan Regeer, so he let me know how to pronounce his name. And
Amazing.
he's about 9'7" as well. He's huge.
Jesus. I
He's
mean,
big.
he's intimidating, but to be honest, him in this as Count Dracula, or Dracula, I don't know why I said Count Dracula, I just said Dracula, but Dracula is still to this day one of my favourite on-screen performances as
Mhm.
Dracula, because he is incredibly, like, he just has a goal, he has a mission. Like, there's no light-heartedness to this Dracula whatsoever.
Mhm.
He's pure, essentially sadistic evil in this movie. Like, he is just a bad guy, and I love that they went that route with him. He's not trying to play it up for cheesiness or anything like that. He's just pure. He's a pure bad guy in this,
Mhm.
and I love that how he plays Dracula in this.
Yeah, me too. Like there's the scene where he blows up the clubhouse is like meeting adjourned. Boof, like
Yeah,
he will
yeah,
kill the he's killing the police officer, Sean's dad's partner.
yeah,
He relentlessly grabs Phoebe by the neck and says,
yeah,
"Give me the amulet, you bitch!" So
yeah,
he won't stop. Now sounds like I'm being biased here, but he is my favorite Dracula. Like there's no other Dracula for me that comes close to
yeah.
Duncan Regeer's Dracula, and it might also be because I'm quite the opposite of a lot of people in terms of horror. The Monster Squad was what introduced me to the Universal monsters. It wasn't the other way around. Like I know
Right.
that some
Okay.
people
Yeah.
watch it thinking, "Oh, I watched this because of Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula." I'm actually watching this thinking this is normal, and it's not.
Yeah.
This is like the Avengers for horror,
Yeah. You're right.
horror
Yeah.
character, So I just thought this was normal when I was a kid, but these characters were introduced to me in the Monster Squad. So he was probably the first. In fact, he wasn't the first Dracula that I saw. I watched a movie called The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, and that was the first time I saw like a vampire Dracula. But his his performance as Dracula is still to this day my favorite by far.
Yeah, and it's so easy to see why. It's such a great performance. It's just relentless. Like I always say this comes up in the podcast a lot, and so because I've never been scared by movies. I won't go into much, but even since a kid, like my brain has always been able to differentiate movies from real life, and
Mm-hmm.
so even as a kid, I knew that I was putting in a movie to watch it. It was a movie. I've never been scared or frightened by them. I'd like to be, but it just doesn't work in my brain like that. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's my brain's broken, and so when I watch movies like that, I just take it like I'm never scared by them or so on. But what is always interesting to me is that what freaks me out possibly more than anything is what we consider the unstoppable force, the intimidation of people like Michael Myers and Jason, and the unstoppable force that they're going to do everything they can. They will not stop until they've done what they need to. And that to me is more terrifying than ghost schools and goblins and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love, is that there's something almost reminiscent of, say, a Michael Myers or a Jason sort of character in this through Dracula, because Dracula in this is an unstoppable force, and the way he's played is so intimidating, so strong. He's like, he hasn't got time for anything apart from, I need the amulet because I wanted to take over the world. And when you put it a bit like that, it sounds so cartoonish, but at the same time, like Pinky in the Brain or something like that. But at the same time, when you watch it in the movie, it's very, very real, and the threat of Dracula in this movie is very real. He's the big boss guy,
Yeah.
and he plays it that way. So it's so easy for you to see why he's your favorite Dracula, and he's definitely one of my favorite Draculas. In fact, he could be. It's just I'm not clever enough to think of what my favorite one might be. But yeah, then you move on to things like, obviously we've got the Gillman, we've got the creature from the Black Lagoon in this. You've got Tom Noonan, like I mentioned, who plays Frankenstein's monster, who is so fucking fantastic in this movie at Frankenstein's monster, and they do a great job. Once again, this would be something that we'd talk about, of through the prosthetics, him being able to portray the emotion that Tom Noonan is so well at portraying. He's a fantastic actor outside of all this makeup, as we all know if we've seen his movies. He does such a great job, and his interactions with Phoebe are so great in this movie. And it's nice. It's a nice contrast from who Dracula is.
Yeah, because they bounce off each other. They're equally as scary looking, and Frankenstein's monster could easily be the scariest one, but because of his relationship with Phoebe and the other boys, he's got a kind of heartfelt, warm feeling every time you see him. He's like a bumbling idiot as well. Like when they're talking about like, oh, is this guy dead? And Frankenstein's monster's like, dead. And he's like bogus. He's learning things.
I love that bit.
He's like the sloth of the Monster
exactly.
Squad.
I was just about to
That's
say it.
his type of character, but it's more heartfelt with him, and we'll probably get into this later on, but one of the most emotional scenes in any horror film like this happens at the end of the Monster Squad between him and Phoebe, and it still to this day remains. I mean, I watched the Monster Squad with my kids, and when they watched that scene, especially my daughter, who was kind of Phoebe's age when she first watched it, she was crying. She's like, no, Frankenstein, no, no, no. So the film resonates with people of all ages, and I think that's a lot down to the fact that Frankenstein's monster and Phoebe has that relationship. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. He's almost like like she has her, I can't remember the name, but she has like her teddy in it, but it almost feels like he's almost like a bigger more like a monster version of her teddy, so to speak.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that's how it
Scraps or
feels like.
something. I can't remember. It's Scraps or something. Its name
Yeah,
was.
I think it is. Yeah, I think you're right. Scraps or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he sort of feels like there feels like a true friendship in that. Like with
Mm-hmm.
when you're watching, like say, like the Goonies and stuff, and you've got Sloth. I mean, it's a bit more comical,
Yeah,
like their
yeah,
relationship and stuff. And he's like, shouting all the stuff that he does, "Hey, you guys," and all that sort of stuff. But it's
yeah,
fun. Obviously, the Goonies is just pure fun and so on. But like you've mentioned, like we keep mentioning it, that there's something a bit more human about this. There's something a bit more grounded, the way that it's written, the way that it's acted. Um, it really pulls on the heartstrings, like you're saying. It pulls on the heartstrings more than something like the Goonies does.
yeah,
Goonies is like right now, like now Goonies is just pure fun nostalgia. With this, there's more to the idea, the concept, the story, and the structure of the movie and how it's put to screen. That's what's more interesting about
yeah.
Monster Squad for
I,
me.
I will. I will say about the Goonies though is the scene at the end of the Goonies when Chunk says to Sloth, "You're going to come live with me now, okay?" And
Yeah,
Chunk goes, "Huh?" And his ear starts moving. That was hilarious.
yeah,
Yeah, but that again,
yeah,
that's the more comical aspect of their relationship, which means you don't really feel the way you
yes,
feel like you do with Phoebe and Frankenstein or Frankenstein's
yeah.
monster.
You're right. Yeah, the emotional connection between those two is really really sweet, and I
Yeah,
really enjoy it. But once again, like we're in but what's cool? So you got all these other monsters and so on. The mummy, he turns up. He doesn't really do too much that much, but he looks fucking cool.
he does. Yeah. Hmm.
But what I really love about this, and the reason that I want to speak about the characters and the performances, is that this film does something that the Goonies doesn't do much. It doesn't really touch on it. Like what I like about movies is where they integrate those adult elements to them, so they have like the mother and the father or so on like that. But in the Goonies, it's only pretty much like at the start. They go on their adventure, they come back at the end, they save the day, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
This movie has a lot of adult themes running throughout from start to finish,
yeah,
and the parents are more of an integral like partnership of this movie. They are more of an integral part. The dad in it and the mum, both of them are fantastic. But the guy that plays the dad, I completely forgotten his name. He's probably here
Stephen
somewhere.
Mack.
That's it. Yeah. He's fantastic in this movie. Like once again, and you're right. And the more you talk about this movie, the more you respect it and appreciate it, because the writing, the performances work so well in this that you genuinely believe that what you're watching is a real father-son relationship. And I
Hmm.
love how they are in this. Like, he's not just a dad that's an arsehole and shouts at his kids all the time. And that's why they create this monster squad, because it's almost creating a new world for them, and they're taking themselves out of their lives that are living with these, bad homes and bad lives and all that sort of stuff. They do have those aspects in it where the parents are struggling within their relationship, which they show within the movie. And
Hmm.
once again, that's such a really fantastic story point and story arc for those characters. But I really truly love the relationship that Sean and his dad have in this movie, and it's still, even though everything is going on, he's still being a parent. He might
Yeah.
be one of those parents that isn't where he needs to be as much as he should be, and can't be around as much as you should, because he's obviously a detective and he's a cop and stuff. But when he is there, he's trying to take that time to spend with his son, like he does when they're watching the movie on the roof. You
Hmm.
can tell that he truly does love his family. He's trying to make everything work, but it's tough for him and it's tough for the mum. I
Yeah.
think that's a really brave thing to do in essentially a kids movie.
Hmm. Yeah. Exact same feeling. Like I've got a lot to say about how this is very deep because when I was younger, I watched it from obviously the squad's point of view, being that child wanting to have that adventure. But when I watched it as an adult, I still get that feeling of watching it as that teenager. But I am obviously an adult now, and I can see it from the parents' point of view.
Yeah,
Obviously, the parents are arguing, no relationship's perfect, and you've got kids. And the way that Dale, the dad, um, has his relationship with his son. I feel like that's like me and my son, Jack. Now, Jack's 13 and Sean is probably about 13 or 12 or 13 in this. So I feel like his relationship with his dad is similar to mine and my son right now. Like, we love watching scary movies together. We have some really good, deep conversations. So when it comes to the parents in the film, the mum is obviously the mum from the Goonies as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that dynamic that the kids have with the parents, it's spot on, and I see it from a different point of view. However, the biggest and the darkest scene in this film has to be with Scary German Guy. I didn't understand anything about the Holocaust as a kid.
no,
So
no,
watching it as an adult, this is again, it's borderline kids film, borderline adult. But when you
yeah,
watch Scary German Guy and he shows his
yeah. His
tattoo of
tattoo that he's got.
Auschwitz
Yeah,
and stuff, yeah, I mean, that's deep. That's deep stuff.
yeah,
Stuff
yeah.
that
And
you'll
you're
never
right.
see. You'll never see that in the Goonies. So
No,
when it comes to watching a kids adventure horror film, is brilliant. But when it comes to watching it as an adult, a smart adult film, it has it all. So it's deep when it has to be, and it's funny when it has to be as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point to move on to what I was saying about the concept, the story, the structure, the scripts, everything to do with that. So obviously we know it was directed by Fred Decker, but it was written by Shane Black. So
Black
Shane
and Decker.
Black, who a lot of people may or may not know, but he is a writer slash actor because you will know him from Predator as well. He plays somebody in Predator.
Mhm.
And he did write. He does a lot of writing. He made an incredibly, once again, not underrated because it's incredibly good, but an underseen movie. It's a film called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Not a horror, but if nobody's seen that, that is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the most perfectly written movies there's ever been. Val Kilmer, one of my favorite performances of all time in that movie. Kiss Kiss
Yeah.
Bang Bang is a great movie. But yeah, so Shane Black, he wrote that. I'm sure he directed that. I can't remember, but I'm
Kiss
sure he.
Kiss Bang Bang. Yeah, he directed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He also
So
directed Iron Man 3, of course.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So he's somebody that a lot of the time, especially in the 80s and 90s, that Hollywood would really go to him if they wanted scripts. And he was somebody I feel that he really creates a real environment or a real human element to the characters, like you see. Like I feel like if you didn't have Shane Black on a movie like this, you wouldn't have these extra elements that we're talking about, like these adult elements, like adding in, like you said, about the guy with the Auschwitz and the tattoo and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
don't think without someone like Shane Black who wants to create a world like that within a movie like this. If it had been someone else, it would have been more like the Goonies. But
Yeah.
with someone like Shane Black who writes movies from the perspective of Shane Black, irrelevant of genre or irrelevant of it's a kids movie or an adults movie, he just wants to write a best version of something, irrelevant of how that works.
Yeah. Hmm.
If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so what I love is there are so a lot of, and you're exactly right. This movie is one of those movies that's a joy to watch when you're a kid, but a joy to watch when you're adult because it does take a lot of brave choices, like adding in things there for as an adult that, like you mentioned, you don't get as you're a kid. Like when you're a kid, you don't think about the whole parents are finding it tough and they struggle with their relationship, and a lot of the times, if the parents are doing that, they're trying to shield their kids away from it. Um, they do that a lot, and
Mhm.
they show that within the movie. And I think that's such a really brave and really interesting way of approaching a kids' movie. But then, like I said, like near the start, I think that helps create something that's timeless. Like everyone and anyone at any age, like you said, can watch it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it's all thanks to Shane Black. We have a little joke sometimes about. Well, you're from England, so you know the company Black and Decker,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tools. So always it's written and directed by Black and Decker, Shane Black and Fred Decker.
yeah,
Also, Shane Black and Fred Decker last collaborated on Predator from 2018, which
yeah.
I actually enjoyed. I know that a lot of people don't like it, but it had that kind of feeling again of the Monster Squad, of these groups of dysfunctional people banding together to defeat the Predator. That's what I liked about the Predator film, but I know that a lot of people didn't like that film. So it's just unfortunate. However, Shane Black is a very talented writer. He used to live in a flat, an apartment with people like David Fincher.
Oh,
So
really?
Yeah, so these people together, they're coming up with lots of these scripts. Fred Dekker, Shane Black, David Fincher, they're pumping out all these scripts and sending them to Hollywood to see what sticks. And all these years later, unfortunately for Fred Dekker, after the calamity of Robocop 3, he didn't get anything after that. But
Yeah,
with Shane Black going on to direct films like Iron Man 3, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, he's obviously still big in Hollywood. And then his their other friend, David Fincher, is one of the best directors today. So they came from a very talented pool of writers, and the Monster Squad was one of their babies.
yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely. And you can see it, and you're exactly right. It's just, yeah, this is a movie that I really, 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 truly, if you're just going on story, on structure, it's a film that I really, really highly respect, and don't think it actually gets respected probably enough in regards to the quality of what we see on screen and how it's being portrayed and so on. Because, like I said, we don't really get any of this dysfunctional family relationship, parentship sort of stuff in the Goonies. It's
Mhm.
very way more light-hearted. This film goes to those places, but they do it really expertly. It's really well crafted. You genuinely, like we keep mentioning, like you mentioned as well. We really truly do feel for the characters in this movie, because there is it's the sense of the fact that these are real people.
Mhm.
And I think that the credit goes to everyone making this movie. Like, there isn't, when you're watching this movie as an adult, especially obviously outside of all of this, like acting and filmmaking is what I've always wanted to do. Anybody that watches or listens to the show, they know that. So that's why I have these tick boxes in my head when I'm watching these movies. And that's why a film that is, obviously from the 80s, still to this day, that you can watch and you can enjoy because of the adult themes that they add in there, or the structure, or the interesting ways that they take the movie or the relationships. It's really, really rewarding when you get to watch a movie like this, because you're like, okay, this is still a movie that Hollywood now should be learning from.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't even touched on the fact that the homeless man in the Monster Squad, he's a character that just wants to die because he doesn't
Yeah,
want to become the Wolfman, and he's literally thanking them for killing him at the end of the film.
yeah,
So that's deep. That's something again you wouldn't see in a PG-13 or 12A or anything like that. They just won't cover things like that anymore. Whereas they had the balls to do it back in 1987.
yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah, so really, really good point as well. Is, yeah, just the pain of this constant transformation that this man has to go through, that he no longer wants to live about it. He's not bad. He's not a bad man. He's just a
Mhm.
wolf man, and he doesn't want it anymore. And
Yeah.
that's really sad as well. So yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, as perspective of it, because poor old Uncle Rico, he
Yep.
yeah, he sort of no longer wants to exist, and that's really sad. But once again, as a kid, you're like, oh, the Wolfman's fucking cool.
Yeah. Because he's got nards.
Yeah, because he's got nods. That's it. But that's a cool. I mean, so once again, having conversations like this can lead into other conversations, and that's what's really good. Because one of the things that is, for me, obviously a standout of the movie, because we're talking about the Wolfman as well, is the monsters themselves, and how absolutely incredible they look. Now, they're going to look this good because we have one of, if not the greatest in the game to do it, and that's um, uh, what the hell is happened to my brain? Stan Winston. Jesus Christ! I literally had his name in my head for like 20 minutes, and now I've just forgotten it. But Stan Winston, one of the best, one of the greatest in the game, one of the most important people to be creating effects for cinema. Pretty much anything that you can think of that is some of the greatest of all time, Stan Winston's name will be behind it. And I like the fact that this film, even though it still feels, there's something still funny about this movie, that it still feels quite small and quite indie. But I
Yeah.
don't know whether that's because of obviously the fact that it's not known like the Goonies, so to speak. So there's still something very sort of culty about this movie. But one thing that isn't like that is how absolutely incredible Stan Winston's work on this movie is.
Oh yeah. Stan Winston also had a lot of things he had to tackle when he was designing the monsters. And I don't know if you're going to do like a section of trivia, but one of the trivia is that it's not a Universal movie.
Yeah,
So they weren't allowed to use Universal monster designs for the film. So Stan Winston had to come up with similar styles to what we recognize as the monsters, but make it a little bit different. So like the bolts in Frankenstein's head had to be moved to a different position
moved
on his
up.
head.
Yeah,
So all those types of things he had to tackle. And to be honest, I think Stan Winston's designs ended up looking better than
yeah,
a lot of the original monster designs for me. So I talk about Stan Winston all the time because he is the master of his trade.
yeah,
Him and Rick Baker, probably two
yeah.
of the best. But Stan Winston, for me, designed one of the best Halloween masks outside of the original and the David Gordon Green trilogy, and that's the Halloween H2O mask. I know a lot of people hate it, but he truly did design a really good mask in the space of time that he had. But with the Monster Squad, with the budget that they had, he worked wonders, miracles, because the creature designs, the Wolfman design is one of the best Wolfmans I've ever seen. The Gillman, incredible.
Oh, so good.
He wasn't the only one that designed the Gillman. There was two other guys, can't remember their names, but they were the guys who uh, worked tirelessly through the nights to create this Gillman. So not just Stan Winston, but a couple of other guys were on behind the scenes designing some of them. But some of the greatest designs you'll ever see, and to this day, I don't think they've been beaten. So,
No, I think you're right, and I like that you mentioned the Gillman as well, because out of all of them, he's my favourite looking. But
mhm.
what's insane, and you're right, that what I find absolutely, this is how good but the Gillman, the creature from the Black Lagoon, looks in this, is that he is still aesthetically my favourite looking Universal monster. I think he looks absolutely phenomenal for the
Yeah,
time, for what they created. It's such an incredible look. Um, but they did it better in this. So that's how good that the Gillman, that the effect created by Stan Winston, like you said, the other people that created Gillman and all the other stuff as well. They're so good that they had to beat something that was already incredible,
yeah,
and really did. And yeah, you're right. They had to do things like the Wolfman. They had to give him like pointy ears because that was something that differentiated it. Each character had to have something that was slightly different and a little bit off to what Universal did. And quite honestly, I'm still surprised that they got away with a lot of it.
yeah, same. Yeah, because they looked identical
But
to me, but
yeah, but at the same time, I'm so happy they did, because and I'm completely with you. Like, these still for me are still like the benchmark for you to go, well, why are you not creating something that still looks like this or
yeah,
better than this? Because this is another example of how well this movie did every aspect. That's what's great about this movie, is you can, like I said, in my brain, everything's all separated. And when I'm watching movies like this, I separate all these different things, and I'm like, oh, okay. So then we go to the practical effects, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is still from the 80s, a benchmark of going, look how good this is, and
mhm.
why are we still not creating something that is trying to be that or better now? We see so many costumes now that you're like, oh God, that's just a guy in it, and it doesn't look good. And like you mentioned earlier on, like, this for back then wasn't a big movie. It still feels like a big budget movie. It still feels like a cult sort of movie, but yet we're still talking here going, these are some of the best looking fake Universal monsters that there's
Yeah,
ever been.
yeah.
Um,
Look at the Wolfman transformation in the phone box when he's like
yeah,
talking to Sean's dad. He's like, he's going to kill your son, and then he starts like spitting from the mouth, and then the camera kind of pans around the phone box, but with every pane of glass, you see a bit, a difference in the transformation. The transformation scene is up there with one of the best transformations for a wolf ever.
yeah, absolutely. And so often there's aspects in this movie that could go so wrong in so many other types of movies, but yet once again it's great. And I love the fact that there are those horror elements to this movie as a kid, like, and once again you still get those sort of fright aspects, those terror aspects of this
Mhm.
movie, that even though it is like a kids movie, or sort of disguised as a kids Goonies-esque movie, I do still really feel that there's a lot of horror themes within it,
Yeah.
as well as the adult themes we've talked about already. But there's
Mhm.
a lot of really, like, horror themes in it as well. One that I'll mention when we get to the bit later on where we talk about our favourite scenes. There's a scene in it that always is a scene that I'm like, it's so fucking cool, but also at the same time, it's incredibly dark, and it's basically Dracula being the mean bastard that he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, you've got great practical effects, incredible performances. The story, you know, directing by Fred Decker. Also, I mean, you can't really like doubt he's directing in this as well, because this is a visually, aesthetically good looking movie. This is a great, like, when I was watching this the other day, even on VHS, and obviously the multiple times I've seen it on different format, the lighting in this movie is always spot on. Like, it's fantastic, the movie. And it really, once again, like, this is always like, it's always interesting when you get movies like this, because you understand that Fred Decker is obviously somebody that understands the technical craft of filmmaking, and that really shows when you get movies like this, because this is a very visually appealing movie, not just because of the monsters themselves, but because of the surroundings and the set pieces and the lighting. It looks really, really good, this movie.
It does, yeah. Now the film has that Steven Spielberg emblem look
Yeah,
and aesthetic to it, like the Goonies, like films like E.T., Cocoon, all those mid 80s to late 80s high quality movies. Now, I think this film cost about $10 million at the
yeah,
box. Now, sorry, it cost about $10 million to make. Unfortunately, it only made about $3.5 million at the
yeah,
box office, and that was the downfall. And the problem with that was it came out the same time as The Lost Boys, so it
yeah,
was competing against one of the best, if not the best, vampire film of all
yeah,
time that became known. But at the time, they obviously didn't know what they were up against, and it was a shame because I think with the box office of the Monster Squad, people just forgot about it because they thought, "No, waste of money. Let's just hide it, and that's it." But aesthetically, the film is beautiful. I
yeah.
can't remember the cinematographer, unfortunately, but the cinematography in it was top notch. Some of the best cinematography you'll see in a film of that era.
Yeah, and you're great. What I like about it as well is it's great you mentioned like things like it's very Amblin, very Spielberg and stuff like that. And there's a lot of very shots in this that make me think of Spielberg a lot, where Spielberg does a lot of like panning, revealing shots. So he does a lot of stuff where the camera will move to reveal a character at the
Mhm.
forefront or in the background and
Yep.
so on like that. And this movie does that a lot, where somebody, you know, there might be a car here, but then it slowly pans where you're watching something, but then somebody will appear in the car here, and that will initiate the conversation that they're going to have. It's
Mhm.
a very, very intelligently crafted movie that it has taken a lot from the films that we love, that we get nostalgic for, like you mentioned, the Goonies and anything that's sort of Amblin. And once again, you can't help but get very, very nostalgic when you watch movies like this, because we were like, because I talk about this all the time, but I feel that there's a forgotten way of filmmaking, especially now. I love the aesthetical look, the technical aspect, the cinematography of movies from the 70s and the 80s, where the camera was used differently. Now, a lot of the time, it's point and shoot. Most of the time, it's a close up when you don't need it. Most of the time, we very rarely get wide shots to show everything. Everything is very claustrophobic now, but that doesn't tell the story. Back then in the 80s, the 70s, early 90s, so on like that, people were trying to tell a story, but also still creating some of the most iconic imagery that you'll ever still see to this date. The first
Mhm.
Halloween movie, to me, even being such a small sort of low budget movie, is still to me one of the most beautiful looking movies ever made.
Mhm. Yeah.
Same as, you know, Jaws and so on, the way Spielberg does that. But this film, once again, it's frustrating because where this film is, like I said, so underseen, not underrated, but underseen,
Yeah.
people haven't had the time or haven't had the opportunity to look at a movie like this with those respects and with those regards. And that's a sad thing, because you're like, they created something that is truly incredibly inspiring when you watch this movie for the time and for now, in regards to every aspect. We've spoken about different aspects of this movie and how well they're crafted, and that wouldn't happen if you didn't have people who knew what the fuck they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was classic at the end as well, where with the cinematography and stuff like that, you see the finale that takes place around the town hall area,
Yeah,
and I see behind you, you've got Back to the Future there,
That's right.
It's almost an identical scene.
Almost, yeah.
You know, you got the clock tower and the Back to the Future, that kind of area. I think that's probably the place where they shot it. And just going back to the 80s aesthetic look, it's just like smack bang in the middle of the 80s when they knew how to film a movie where, like you said, they've got these long panned shots of a wider scope. It's not like cut to here
Yeah,
where you
that's
just
it,
see like
yeah.
quick cuts and you're like, oh, what was, I can't really see what you're trying to show us. Whereas back in the day, they had these big wide shots where you can see the
Yeah.
whole town. You can see
Everything, yeah.
there's a car in the background where the Wolfmans come running round, but Sean and Rudy are at the front with the dad, and you can see that kind of brilliant depth of field where they're
Yeah.
coming into the forefront. So great filmmaking, not just because of the script and the dialogue, but filmmaking is also part of what you're looking at as
Yeah.
well. So it's great the way they've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a beautiful movie, and like you're saying, yeah, like as I said, like to me, those movies of the past that we don't really get that style of filmmaking anymore. It's
Mhm.
such a shame because that's when we got there's a reason why we talk about these movies that are iconic, that are classic, that are going to live on forever, like Jaws and so on, like that. Part of that is because we're watching something that we can't take our eyes off. And
Mhm.
part of that isn't, like you mentioned, not just the performances, not just the story, it's the aesthetic, it's the look. It's people like Spielberg, and like you mentioned earlier, Phil Fincher and so on like that. Like they are masters at their craft, and they truly fully understand that to tell a story, you use the aesthetics to help that as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, like I love the shots in Jaws that, like, to anybody else, they're like little throwaway shots. But like you're saying, where you've got these beautiful wide angle shots where you're seeing the madness of Amity in the background. Whereas, and that's so good because it brings so much life to what you're watching and more realism and so on.
Mhm.
Whereas now, so much is just close-up shots, and we don't get to see, the big picture or what it is. And that to me, it frustrates me because I'm like, we've sort of gone backwards in regards to technical filmmaking, and there's not many people out there that do it like that as much at the moment. One of the people I would say that does it really well at the moment is Ty West. Ty West is somebody for me that is somebody that I get excited about every movie he makes, not even necessarily because of what's happening in the movie or what the movie is about. I just
Mhm.
truly love his technical filmmaking, because if you look at his movies, every film he does is different, and it's always a different aesthetical journey that you're on with Ty West. So that's why I really enjoy his movies, even if they could be shit, and I don't, and they might not even be about anything that I care about, but
Yeah.
I'll always be there. House of the Devil, to go from House of the Devil and then to Innkeepers, and they're so completely different in regards to how they're made and how they look, but they're phenomenal movies and sound design and everything. So Ty West is one of those. But as I said, I feel like we are sort of lost. We've lost the way to how to have movies integrate aesthetics and cinematography to tell a story,
Yeah.
which probably doesn't make any sense, but it's there.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
But that's it. Well, there you go. So there's that. Obviously, we've already mentioned that the music in this movie is great. I think the score itself is a great, like you mentioned, almost like an Amblin-esque sort of score, so to speak, that we get throughout it.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's not someone like John Williams, but it could easily probably be John Williams.
Well,
He does everything else.
the guy who done the score is still a well-known musician. He's Bruce Broughton. He does the score for the film. I've got the score, and
Oh, okay.
even just listening to the score on its own without the film is brilliant, and it takes you right back to those late 80s that we loved as kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great. And then, but the music itself is great. You've got like two songs like we got in the 80s and the 90s that are like made for the movie. You've got
Mhm.
you've got the Monster Squad song, which is just classic, like
Yeah.
80s, 90s rap, whatever it is, but it's just great. Obviously, one of my favorite songs that is always on my Halloween playlist, "Rock Until You Drop."
Yeah.
I listen to that when I'm cooking way too often.
Mm. Yeah. I
But,
listen to that all the time. Yeah. Rock Until You Drop by Michael Cimbello, who also sang Maniac as well.
Oh,
She's
really?
a maniac. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. But yeah, that's just one of those songs. And that is one of what I love about that and what I love about this movie. I'll talk a little bit about that probably later if I remember. But there's so many little connections that me and my daughter have because of this movie. And
Mhm.
that's the amount of times that I might hear her upstairs or come downstairs and she's just going dun dun dun, dun and doing the rock until you drop and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'll be doing it. And it's like this weird, like sort of psychic connection that we have with our kids where we're doing the same sort of thing, and it happens a lot, and it tends to be something from like rock until you drop and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, great music, sound in this sound design. Obviously, it's a great. It's just an incredibly well crafted movie. Um, there's obviously we get obviously a montage in it as well, which is always fucking cool. That's always nice to have a montage in the movie when they're making all their silver bullets and stuff like that. You know that you do when you're at school.
Yeah.
Um,
You wouldn't have an 80s horror adventure movie without a montage, and you can't. So, montage in this one was amazing. I loved the montage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a great montage and obviously great music over top and so on. It's just a fun. It's such a fun movie, and I'm looking forward to going doing the overall sort of thoughts because there's so many like we this is the details. This is where we're going through it bit by bit and just really talking about how impressive this movie is, and it's incredibly impressive, and it's a shame that it's not seen more as being as impressive as it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, I did mention that it is a movie that is quite serious in tone, but there are some standout moments in regards to it being funny. And there's some great lines in this. One of them that I mentioned earlier on was obviously when they're talking about the teacher with the odd shaped head. I loved obviously you mentioned one earlier when the little kid, I always forget her name. You
Phoebe.
remember. Ruby,
Phoebe.
that's it. It mentions about being prescriptive or whatever it is, and obviously it's not
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah.
You've got also when she turns around and says to him not to be a chicken shit. I love that.
Mhm.
That's just so much fun. And then obviously we get that they kick Wolfman in the nards, and that was just one of the funniest lines. I remember sitting there watching it as a kid, and I was like, "This is the funniest shit I've ever fucking seen in my life."
Yeah.
And the
And
amount of times I would kick people in the nards so I could say I kicked you in the nards. That was the
the,
horrible little shit that I was.
I like the beginning as well with Rudy. Rudy's got some really great scenes as well where
Yeah,
EJ, the bully, is trying to bully Horace, and then Rudy he gets a match and lights his match off his
does it on
shoe,
his shoe. Yeah,
and he's like, "You dropped your candy bar, EJ." He's like, "Eat it." He's like, "Rudy." He's like, "Eat it." It's so good.
yeah. And it's such a good. I love. We don't really get this anymore, but it's like even as a kid and stuff, you have like these really cool introductions to characters. Like we need
Mhm.
to bring these sort of introductions back because he just comes in and does rather than Clint Eastwood doing it on his stubble, he just does it on his shoe, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, what a fucking badass, you know
You
what I
know,
mean?
a boy at
Uh,
school lighting a cigarette at school, you won't see that anymore, which is good. It's a
no,
good thing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
also with Horace as well, when he kind of proves himself to be the hero when he saves EJ and his friend, and
yeah,
he shoots the gill man. He turns around, he's like, "My name is Horace," and the boy's
yeah.
like, "Whoa!"
That's
So
it,
yeah,
and he's
some great.
just a fucking kid with a shotgun. Just
Yeah,
as,
it's just so natural. Like nobody questions it. You're like, "Oh yes, brilliant,
yeah,
love it."
that's it. All these kids are out. Where do I get a shotgun from?
Mhm. Yeah, no parents are worried about their kids either. You've even got little, what's his name again? Michael Faustino's little Eugene with his
Yes,
dog. He's out like at night time, and his parents aren't out looking for him. He's just out chasing monsters with his friends, as you do.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, well, that was the way of life back then.
Yeah,
That's what it
I
felt
done
like.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Like we were just out whenever we wanted, unaware of the dangers of the world because we didn't really have what we have now. I mean, we're very lucky that we get to. It's a burden sometimes, but like we say, there's a benefit to it. The way that we get to protect our kids way more than we. People used to, and so on
Yeah.
like that. We get to protect our kids way better than and know how to protect them or what we're protecting them from more now. But
Yeah.
but also at the same time, the freedom's lost, so to speak, at the same time, and
Yeah.
freedom of going around at whatever time at night. on my BMX and going around to like the back of B&Q and places like that where they used to chuck out shit. And we used to go and steal the things from the back of B&Q and Halfords, and we would steal shit from the back there, and we would take them on our bikes, and we would go and make our den in this forest thing, and we had our own like den. Unfortunately, not a cool fucking treehouse like Monster Squad had, but we had our own sort of den that we would invite people to, and if you weren't invited, you weren't coming in, and it was great, and we had our first kisses in there. And that's the thing when we talk about the films like Monster Squad. I think it's because of films like The Goonies and The Monster Squad that opened up that way of life for people growing up around that sort of time. And you reminisce about it. It's like I mentioned earlier on about Stranger Things. You know, I think one of the big parts about Stranger Things is because you can watch it if people out there like Stranger Things, it's a program because they enjoy it. But for adults that get to watch it now, you get taken back to the time going, oh, I remember those days.
Yeah. Oh, great time. I probably had the exact same childhood as you. You know, we would steal wood, anything we could to build these dens that we would have in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. Like totally dangerous, but we would do it anyway. Yeah. And I genuinely swear on my kids' lives that we created Monster Squad ID cards. And
nice.
we would hand them out to our friends and say, like, join our Monster Squad. And we literally had a Monster Squad because of the movie The Monster Squad. Great times. We would go out on our bikes and go and look for monsters. We never found any, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you never found any. Never saw any gill men or anything like that in a lake. But yeah, you're right. And how cool would it be if you still had one of those amazing Monster Squad things?
Oh, I would love it because we just done it the same way as the kids did in the movie. See the montage scene where they're cutting up. I think it's Patrick is cutting up some of the bits of paper that says Monster Squad on them. That's exactly how we done ours as well. So I wish I still had them to show them to people, but I don't.
One of those lost gems of time that we used to love, and then we regret, like all my 400-500 VHS tapes that I wish I still had and don't anymore. And it wasn't me that got rid of them. That's all I'm going to say. Once I moved out, they were gone, and there's not a day that goes by that I cry a little bit to myself that I don't have them anymore.
I know.
But it was a great time, and that's what I love about a movie like this, because it makes you reminisce, it makes you nostalgic. And that's a really good form of medicine. Like, nostalgia is a really good form of medicine. Sometimes, I think like a movie like this sometimes helps get rid of the trauma of what childhood can be for people. And, childhood isn't easy. And that's what I like about this movie sometimes as well, is that it feels like Monster Squad is that escapism. It's that escapism of what real life is. And they can go and do it, because irrelevant of everything that's going on, with the fact that it might be the end of the world with Dracula and Gilman and Frankenstein's monster and the mummy and so on, I feel like this would still be their club. They would still be the Monster Squad, because it's their escapism from all the troubles in the world. And that's a really cool thing. It's a really sweet thing. And we got to experience that. And I just hope that kids are still, in their own way, experiencing that. Not the trauma, but the escapism of fun.
Yeah. Do you know, the funny thing is, nostalgia is a powerful thing. Nostalgia is a thing. And I hate it when people say, oh, you're just nostalgic for that film. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing. Nostalgia is a positive. You might not like this film, but I love it. And if my reasons for loving this film is nostalgia, that's a great reason. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. Nostalgia is real. Nostalgia is amazing. And we all have nostalgic feelings towards something. So I use nostalgia as a positive because it's positive.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. For me, it is one of the best forms of medicine, because we get to think of good times rather than having to think of the times that people experience that are negative. We get to look at things on a positive, and nostalgia really truly does that. Most of the time, nostalgia isn't a negative thing; it's a positive thing, and it is really, really great. And a movie does this. And what's funny now is that a lot of people, like you're mentioning, and I've heard it and seen it and so on like that. Who a lot of people almost say nostalgia is like a bad thing and so on like that. These are the people now that are coming round to movies that were like in the 2000s, and looking at them as nostalgia now, because we're old. So
Mhm.
movies like we were mentioned earlier, like The Faculty and so on like that were in early 2000s, and we got those remakes after remake after remake. Like now, people are like, I'm nostalgic for this movie,
Yeah,
and I'm like, I was already old by that point.
yeah.
So
So
our nostalgia is these sort of movies. And at some point in the next 20 years or so, those movies maybe are nostalgia, but people, nostalgia is timeless.
mhm.
Nostalgia is constantly moving because we've had so many different things, and that's what's incredible about hot horror is that it's timeless. It's constantly moving. It's constantly changing.
Mhm.
Every decade it changes. We've mentioned it a million times. The 70s was the year of things that are going to fuck you up. And really true gritty things that had a lot of things that was going on in the world at that time with
Yeah,
the serial killer boom and so on, and we had so much of that gritty griminess in the 70s. The 80s was all about cocaine and fun, and then in the 90s it lost its way until we got to Scream, and that reinvented the genre. And then at the end of the 90s we got the Blair Witch Project, and then everything was found footage movies, and then so on. Like, this is horror is constantly evolving, it's constantly changing
mhm.
decade to decade, and that's what keeps us so interested in it, because we're constantly like, what's next, what's going to be next. But that's what's great about nostalgia, is that our nostalgia is something, and somebody else's nostalgia is something else in horror.
Yeah.
But none of it's wrong, it's just fun, and it makes us feel good, and this is the type of movie that makes us feel good.
Yeah, nostalgia will take anyone back to a time they enjoyed something. That's what nostalgia is all about. You're not going to be nostalgic for the dentist. You're not going to be
Yeah.
nostalgic for things that you didn't like. So if you say something's nostalgic to you, it's automatically taking you back to a time where you had fun, you felt safe, you had a great time, you were obviously younger. So everyone's going to be nostalgic for something. So the people that are saying you just like that because you're nostalgic for it, they're going to be nostalgic for something in the future, and they're going to use that as their love for whatever it is they're talking about. So nostalgia, like we said, it's a powerful thing, and it will never go away.
Absolutely, and we can only hope that that continues, and I only hope that my kid gets to experience what I had in their
Hmm.
own way, and then when they're older, they get their own nostalgia, and it makes them feel good.
Yeah,
Because my kids' nostalgia, that's where it's so cool. Because my kids' nostalgia, when she's a little bit older, is still going to be movies like this, because we're sitting here watching them still.
yeah, yeah. Same with me. Like I watched movies as a kid. Um, that are probably nostalgic to people a generation above me. But because I watched it with them, those movies that aren't in my generation, I'm nostalgic for because I
Yeah,
watched them as a young kid, even though they were old back then. They're obviously older now, but I'm still nostalgic for them because I watched them as a kid and I had a good
yeah.
time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that's more of a deep dive into the Monster Squad and everything it is. Obviously, you can tell it's a film that's obviously had a massive impact on us and so on. And we'll talk a little bit more about our overall thoughts in a minute. Obviously, I have some production info and so on. You're right, I did have the stuff about the creature design, so we don't even need to talk about that one. So that's good. But yeah, the creature designs were slightly changed when they could, so they didn't face legal problems with Universal. But like I mentioned, I still don't understand how, because they because they're
Yeah.
very very similar. The Monster Squad co-writer Shane Black initially wanted a far more overblown and expensive opening scene. The movie's director Fred Decker recalled that Black envisioned Van Helsing laying siege to Dracula's castle with machine guns. Racing out to meet him would be 40 vampire brides riding horses. I mean, I suppose what an insane scene that would be, an opening scene. But I suppose it's one of those things. It's like, it's lucky it didn't do that, because we know how much money this movie lost when it
Exactly.
came out.
Hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. I can just imagine an opening scene that was envisioned by Shane Black. It would feel
Yeah,
like The Predator or something like that at the beginning, or
yeah, yeah,
Lethal Weapon, which obviously he also wrote. So yeah, I think the way that they done it was probably the best way, to be honest.
yeah, absolutely. Duncan Reiger, you can say it better than me.
Duncan Regehr.
Yeah, that's it. Duncan. He beat out Liam Neeson for the role of Dracula,
Yep.
which obviously would have been interesting. Obviously, I think obviously later on, because this was very early on in Liam Neeson's career. Earlier on in his career, obviously he played Darkman and so on like that as well. And obviously, he became incredibly, famous actor with Schindler's List and so on like that. But at the early years, there was a potential time where we might have had Liam Neeson as Dracula
Hmm.
in the movie. But I mean, I think we're both happy that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, we would be none the wiser. If it was Liam
I
Neeson,
suppose,
we
yeah,
we probably would have enjoyed his performance, but because he wasn't there, we were able to enjoy someone else's performance that is still memorable 37 years later.
yeah, absolutely right, yeah.
Mhm.
The original title for the film was The Monster Squad and the Ghoul Squad. Uh, or the Ghoul Squad, or something like that. Either way,
Mhm.
it's one of them. But I mean, the Monster Squad is one of those movies, movie titles that's just iconic. Like, there's not many better film titles than the Monster Squad.
No, not at
I
all.
mean, it's pretty much perfect. You
Mhm.
can't. There isn't much. Like, if you call your film the Monster Squad, everybody else is pissed off that they don't get to call their film the Monster Squad.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the Monster Squad, the effect that the name has on the film is similar to the effect that Halloween has on Halloween, or
Yes,
The Last House on the Left. I Spit on Your Grave. It's got those
yes,
punchy titles. You're like, oh, I'm interested. What's that about?
yeah.
So as soon as a kid of our ages, when we were younger, hear the name the Monster Squad, you'd be like, that sounds interesting. What's that about? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're hooked just from the title itself.
And then,
And
like you
then,
said, the poster as well, like you said.
yeah, absolutely. It's just, we got so much cool stuff back then
Mhm.
that just really helped sell the movies before you even saw them.
Yeah.
And we don't get that as much anymore. I think a lot of people now, or companies, are definitely coming around or background to the idea and the concept of how important promotion is before the movie itself. So yeah, I think that we're definitely coming back round to that way of doing it. But obviously, the 80s, the 90s sort of thing, they did it best, and the
Yeah.
70s obviously as well. Um, moments before the credits roll, a victorious Sean looks at the camera lens and says, "We're the Monster Squad." Wanting the line to sound cooler, Decker instructed Gower to do it like Clint Eastwood. So to the final moments of the movie, where Sean says, "We're the Monster Squad," which is fucking, and then you get the bomb, bump, like that
Mhm.
fucking great. What a great cool ending to the movie. Like, that's one of those things where, if you were lucky enough to ever see it like this at the cinema, or movies like this at the cinema, you walk out and you think you're like Bobby Big Bollocks. You know what I mean? Like, walking out like, I'm fucking cool, and I've just watched some cool shit. It's a great end to the movie, but yeah, he just basically told him to be more like Clint Eastwood. I don't know if he achieved the Clint Eastwood thing, but it still was cool.
Oh yeah. That scene as well at the end. I still vividly remember the first time my son watched this film. When Sean went up to the army guys and he's like, "We're the Master Squad," and he just goes, "Doo, doo, doo,"
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Jack, my boy, just like, "Oh!"
Yeah, that's it. I know. It's like an 80s mic drop.
Oh yeah, it's such a short film as well. It's only 82 minutes long, including the credits. So as soon as it hit that moment, you're constantly going through this film at a fast pace.
Yeah,
There was no dull moment. And then when he just said, "We're the Monster Squad," we were totally satisfied right at that
yeah.
moment.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right as well when you say that. That this is such a short film, but it is relentless. There's no time to stop in this movie. It just goes set piece to set piece to set piece, scene to scene, character to character. Like,
Mhm.
it's non-stop, start to finish. Like, the opening scene, then you move on to this, and you move on to this, and you got this character. And once again, like, it could have been so over, too much. It could have been too much, but it never feels too much. This movie, like, you want more time with this movie and with this character. This is one of those movies that obviously we know why it didn't get a sequel, because of it didn't make any money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you would so want a sequel to this movie. But, not now, obviously, probably, but you back then, like, this is just one of those movies that you would happily continuously watch 4 or 5, if not more, monster squads and see what keeps happening and what the journey they're on. As long as they're, crafted the same sort of way or in that sort of manner. But that's just because of how well this film is made, that it just constantly flows, and it flows so well that you're like, it's never too much, but it's never too little. It's
Yeah.
always exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah, but I remember I spoke to Fred Decker about the like a potential remake or whatever, and I said to him, "Here's a pitch for you," and I said to him, "Why don't you do like a mummy movie, then do a Wolfman movie, then Dracula, then Frankenstein's monster, but spread some of the kids within those films, and then do like an Avengers style film at the end of it and call it the
Oh, okay,
Monster
yeah.
Squad." And he's like, "That's a great idea," and it's an idea that he's actually pitched to
Oh,
studios.
really?
Yeah, he said that's what he said, but nothing's happened since then. So it's something that maybe in the future could still happen. You never know, but Hollywood, they want to do something that was successful before, rather than taking
Yeah,
something that was a great idea before, like the Monster Squad, and it didn't quite hit the mark before. But with the technology that they have today, do something great with it, and
yeah.
involve people like Shane Black and Fred Decker, because they're still in the movie business today. Why not? It makes sense.
Yeah, it's an IP, and it's like we've already mentioned, the name Monster Squad. Like, you're still going to want to watch a movie that's still called Monster Squad to this day.
Hmm.
It's just like you're saying, it can happen. It's just about getting the right people on board to create the new Monster Squad. And if you can do that, then there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to have a success. But at the same time, I'm sure back then they thought they were going to have a success, and then the
Yeah.
Lost Boys ruined it for them. But at
Hmm.
least it was a Lost Boys. It was a Lost Boys, and it wasn't some really shit movie.
Well, if it failed to something else, then that would be bad for them. But 1987 was a huge year for horror films and films in general. You had the Monster Squad, you had the Lost Boys, but also you had RoboCop, you had the Lethal Weapon. All these films came out round about the same time in 1987 as well. So the Monster Squad was just unfortunate that it came out round about a time where there was big films and it just disappeared into the mist.
Yeah, unfortunately, this happens all too often in cinema, where movies go under the radar because of timing,
Mm,
and sometimes it doesn't work out. And it's a shame because, like we mentioned before, that this film sort of feels like it lives in the shadow of a movie that was hugely successful.
mhm.
And it's a shame because this film has or deserves every right to be as successful as that movie, because there's so much to it.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's a really good point into moving into sort of our very sort of quick overall thoughts on the movie. So, Barry, I always let my guests go first. Not that I want to put you on the spot, but
No.
your overall thoughts sort of on Monster Squad.
Well, I've recently just done a video with somebody else with regards to movies that shaped us, which will be out in the future. But it is one of the films that shaped me as not just a movie lover, but as a human being. It's a very influential movie on me my whole life growing up. One of the best films that I watched as a kid. Loved it so much. It still, to me, to this day, is one of the best films ever made. Obviously, it's not Shawshank Redemption. It's not Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, and stuff like that. It's not. It's not like that. It's just a very enjoyable, fun film where you can switch your brain off and have a really good time. And when I say switch your brain off, it's not a stupid film. It's an intelligent movie. And as we've discussed throughout this video, it's got layers to it. You can watch it as a kid, enjoy it, be scared in a fun way, laugh your head off because it's hilarious, but at the same time, watching it as an adult, it's not scary, but it's still fun, it's still funny, and it's got that deep layer to it with like the prisoners of war from the 40s. You get, Holocaust survivors in the film. You've got parents in the movie that have a real relationship. They've got real kids and kids that speak in a real way to as what you would do as a kid as well. So the movie speaks to you in so many different ways that it'll stay with you. My wife watched this film for the first time as an adult, and I was a little bit weary because I thought you might not like this, you might find this cheesy, but she loved it. And my wife
Yeah,
doesn't like horror films. My wife doesn't like old films that she's not seen before. So for her to enjoy a film that's not only a horror film, but an old film, that's unheard of. I believe that any adult watching this film for the first time will enjoy it. I've not heard
yeah,
anyone who doesn't enjoy the movie, whether it be watching it for the first time now or just growing up loving the film as we did. So, just my quick thoughts on it is, if you haven't seen the film, definitely watch it. If you love your fun horror, you love your action, your comedy, heartfelt moments, this film has it all. It's got great special effects, great practical effects, amazing acting from the kids. If you want to see a film that's got good acting from children, it's on the level of Stranger Things in terms of
yeah,
acting by kids. I don't have anything bad to say about this movie. The only one negative I have, which is a positive, is it's too short. I wanted more.
yeah,
If you could
yeah,
give me another
exactly.
25 minutes of this movie, I would probably love it even more. But that's my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've literally everything you've said is literally everything I feel about the movie as
Mm.
well, and so I don't need to. I didn't even say much, but yeah, you're right. It's just this is a movie that helps shape you. If you brought up in this time, if you watched this when you were young, this is the type of movie that the reason that Stranger Things exists, because Stranger Things, as we know, is a lot about nostalgia, and it's looking back at the time when movies like this were made for those people. Yes, it's for the modern day kids. It's like, like a modern day Monster Squad. That's what Stranger Things is. It's like a
Hmm.
modern day Monster Squad, Goonies, and that's why I love watching Stranger Things. But once again, when we're watching it, we can't help think back to our childhood when we got to watch Monster Squad and the Goonies and all these sort of types of movies. I mean, even films like Ghost Chase, but that's a deep cut. But
I know that one.
but yeah, absolutely, with the weird butler thing. I don't even know what he is still, but he's weird.
Well,
Um,
here's your connection to Ghost Chase.
oh, go on.
It stars Jason Lively, who was in Night of the Creeps. That was directed by Fred Decker, who directed The Monster Squad. That's your 6 degrees
Oh,
of Kevin Bacon right there.
oh, there we go. Oh, that's mental. And also, where we're talking about connections as well. Now, I did have to look this up before I get into my other thoughts as well. But the kid that plays Sean and Andre Gower, I think that's his
Mhm.
name. I've got it here anyway. Um, he looks like an identical kid version of Tom Atkins. And I don't understand. I might be the only one that thinks that. But if you look at a picture of Tom Atkins, obviously, if everybody out there will know who he is, but obviously, if you think of like Halloween 3 and,
Mhm.
loads of classic horrors and stuff. But Tom Atkins, this kid looks just like Tom Atkins, but as a kid. But yeah, I'm sure when Tom Atkins was a kid, he didn't look like that. But I looked at a picture of them like together because I looked on Google to see if they were related, just to have a look. But they're not. I can't see anything to see if they're related. But for
Mhm.
some reason, I was just like, this kid looks like Tom Atkins. And then I Googled it, and obviously it's not. I don't know why I thought that, but it is. So if you do a comparison, there we go. So there's even more little fucking degrees of something in this. I'm sure they've probably even been in a film together. I don't know, playing probably father and son or grandfather and son, probably. I don't know, but more than likely. But yeah, you're right. Like every aspect of this movie works. I wish it was longer as well because you want to spend more time with these characters, or I wish we'd have got a sequel to spend more time with these
Mhm.
characters. The journey that they're on is so exciting, but as you said, it's multi-layered with all these multi-different characters. There is nothing to not like about this movie, and very similar to yourself. This is a movie that my partner didn't watch when she was younger. We had watched it. She watched it the first time when I first showed it to my daughter, and my daughter was, from that point, she was obsessed with it. She was like, "This is so cool." She cried. My daughter is emotionless, very similar to me. She doesn't have much emotion, but my daughter cried with the Frankenstein monster and the Ruby bit as well,
Mhm.
and that's when I know that she has a true connection with a movie. In fact, she cries more than watching movies than anything else in life. But yeah, so she had a moment with Monster Squad, but my partner loves Monster Squad as well. And like yourself, I was worried. I was like, I'm going into this. I don't know whether she's going to think it's too dated, it's going
Yeah.
to be too cheesy. But it isn't, because it has those extra layers, those adult themes that as an adult and as a parent, you sit there and go, how well done is that? Like, how respectful is that
Hmm.
It's not taking, they're not, because we get this a lot in movies where you've got arsehole parents who just arsehole to the kids. So then you have a reason for the kids to be the way that they are. But there isn't that. They love their kids in this movie,
Hmm.
and but it's just the reality of what life as a parent can be, and they really respectively play that part really well. But then all the monsters look great and they're played great, and the music, everything is great about this movie. That once again, and like we've mentioned, like the reason why it's always important to talk about films like Monster Squad is one, for the people that know Monster Squad and love it and might want to hear other people talk lovingly about this movie and get nostalgic with us. But it's also about people who haven't seen Monster Squad and don't know Monster Squad, when they're the people that may know the Goonies but don't know the Monster Squad. And you're like, if you know the Goonies, you need to know the Monster Squad. Or if you don't even know the Goonies, you still need to know the Monster Squad,
Yeah.
because every single aspect of it is better than what people might think it is, because it worked. It is a multi-layered movie on every single aspect that is really well crafted and really well written, that does actually get you very nostalgic and actually quite emotional when you talk about it, because it takes you back. But also it's a movie from the past that we don't get anymore, or crafted this way, and it's very sad. But I just hope that anybody that watches this enjoys obviously the conversation, because they can tell how much we love it,
Yeah.
and how we love it more. We don't just, this isn't just a movie that we enjoy. We're able to pick apart a movie like this to have an actual conversation about aspects of it and points of it, and going, well, this is really clever, this is intelligent, this is fun. But it is one of those movies, and I really hope that people who haven't seen it listen to this conversation and then go, okay, there's a reason for me to go and watch it, and then
Yeah.
hopefully they become part of the Monster Squad with us, because that's how we feel. We're part of the Monster Squad.
Yeah, we're part of the squad. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
That's it. That's it. The last thing on the movie itself, because I'm really excited about this, because I love like finding out what it is. The favorite scene. Have you got a favorite scene in the movie?
I do. I've got many favorite scenes, but I've got one that maybe just pips the rest, and I wish I could choose all
A
three.
million, yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I think my favorite scene is the montage, because it just shows how much fun the kids are having, even though they're going out to kill vampires, but they're stealing the parents' cutlery to make the silver bullets. It's just a classic 80s montage. You've got that great Michael Cimbello song, Rock Until You Drop, that
yeah,
wasn't actually released until 2015 or something. Um, but yeah, I think that one specific scene made me want to be part of the Monster Squad. It made me excited to be part of the Monster Squad. It made me create my own Monster Squad with my
yeah,
friends. So I think that scene is my favorite because it's the most influential in the entire film. However, I have to say it, a close second though would be the scene where the Wolfman comes and Rudy turns around and he uses the silver bullet on him and he says,
yeah,
bang, poof, and then he's like, thank you. So
yeah,
that was a very close second. But yeah, montage scene for me is just my favorite. What about yourself?
yeah. So this one, so my favorite scene, or I would say my favorite moment, is part of the big scene. So you've got the big ending part,
Hmm.
with the big set piece of everything's happening. They're trying to destroy all the monsters, and like you mentioned, the Wolfman and Gillman and everything like that. But there's just a moment in it, and this is because my brain is obviously a little bit twisted and dark, and obviously so on. And I mean, when like yourself and everybody, when you spend your whole life watching horror, you take the dark moments sometimes a little bit too literally.
Yeah.
And I did this recently with Killer Clowns from Outer Space, like I've already mentioned. We did an episode about that, and my favorite moment in that is the darkest moment of the movie, where you've got the I think the cop's name is Newman, I think it is, or whatever it is, but the clown turns him, Jumbo, I think it is, turns him into a human puppet. And it's an incredibly dark moment in that movie. And it stands out to me to be my favorite, because it's like an adult theme within these, like, a very like sort of fun kids movie. And the Monster Squad has moments like that. But for me, the moment that always stands out as to the sort of dark and what the fuck moment is in the end scene when Dracula makes his arrival. He turns up and he flat out murders multiple cops
Yeah.
just by walking down the street. And he's snapping necks. He's got one in a headlock, snaps their neck. He's on full on. Like, I've got to get to this amulet. Like I said earlier on, it's very reminiscent of like Michael Myers and Jason, where it's an unstoppable. Dracula in this is an unstoppable force. He's got his mission. That's what he's trying to do. Is he's got to get this amulet, and all these cops are in the way. He goes through them like they're nothing. Like, that's it. He's snapping necks. But that scene, it's not just about what's happening in it, and I absolutely love how dark that bit is, because I'm like, that's fucked up, because he's just snapping necks left, right, and centre. but he should be like a Mortal Kombat character. But what I love about that scene is, once again, and it was from when I was younger as well, and it's one of the scenes that really made me want to be a filmmaker. And still to this day, it's something that really inspires me, is the way that that's filmed, because it's non-stop. You've basically got a shot of Dracula walking across the street, and it only does the bare essentials. Like we were saying, you've got like a wide shot or a closest shot if you need to, or it's showing you everything of this intimidating, imposing Dracula who's pure evil, breaking people's necks, cops' necks. It doesn't matter who they are. He's trying to get to where he needs to. But the way that it's shot is so beautiful. What I love in horror is that we get some of the most horrific things that we've ever seen shown in the most beautiful ways that we've ever seen it. You look at things like I said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the opening of that. The opening of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with them in the graveyard and their sweaty meat bodies melting in the sun is one of the most gruesome and disgusting openings ever. But at the same time, it's one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in cinema. And we get that in horror. So in Monster Squad, that scene is a depiction of pure evil done in one of the most beautiful ways. So that's what I love about horror, and that's my favourite scene in Monster Squad, just because it's Dracula being an absolute badass and evil, but it's shot so well, and then it sticks in my brain. I'm like, okay, that's a level. Like, that's the next level. That's what you should be aiming to achieve. If you're a filmmaker, that's where you should be going. That's what you should be trying to achieve in a scene like that. Rather than now, it'd be like Jason Bourne, where the camera's shaking constantly, and then it's the close-up of their face, and you're like, I didn't see any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. And the scene that is your favourite, it leads up to one of the best moments in the film, where he lifts up Phoebe, and then he gets stabbed in the back by Frankenstein's monster, and he doesn't. He gets choked in the neck, and he turns him round. He's like, bogus, and throws him away. So,
that's
such
it.
a great moment, and even
and once again, great writing.
Yeah, I was going to say the lighting in that scene with the amulet shining off of Dracula the Green, and the music at the same time, like the kind of orchestral music. It's a great moment.
Yeah, and it just feels like every moment on every level is so respected in this movie by everybody creating it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's why it's like it's very difficult to see past how good this movie is and why it's not respected more as to what it is as a movie and what it helped create, because this is part of what helped create so much. Like I said, we wouldn't have Stranger Things. A lot of people always say, the Goonies is such a big thing for Stranger Things, and yeah, sure it is, but for me, we wouldn't have Stranger Things still if we didn't have something like Monster Squad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's got the horror elements to it. They're out chasing monsters, just like the kids in the Stranger Things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there we go. That's the Monster Squad. We've spoken about the Monster Squad. One of the segments in the podcast that I have is Your First Time. Anybody that's listened or watched before know that this is where I have people send me over their first time horror movie memory. This one was sent over to me. I think it was on Instagram, and it's from Lee or Lay. I always get names wrong, so I apologize. They are the creator of a new clothing brand called Pestle and Mortal, mixing heavy metal with houseplants, which is always pretty fucking rad, if you ask me. You can find them at Pestle and Mortal _clothing on Instagram. So make sure you go and check them out. But they sent me over that they remember being 12 years old and having a telly on in my room. Not mine, theirs. My room super late at night. I had to have the volume right down so my parents would never hear it. and the movie Alien came on. I've never been so terrified and mesmerized at anything ever. I couldn't look away. The special effects, the lighting, the alien design, Ripley, all of it was amazing. I could not fall asleep that night, and when I went to school the next day, I told all my friends about the film. And to this day, it is still my favourite film of all time. Love it to bits. That film has definitely influenced my taste in films. Now, I'm a huge horror movie fan. So there we go. So that's the first time, and it references mine because my first horror movie that I ever watched was Alien as well. So, um, so absolutely iconic movie. I always say that Alien is the movie that started me, not just obviously on my journey through horror, but it also started my filmmaking journey as well. Because when I watched that, I'm like, there's not really many movies that are aesthetically more perfect than the first Alien movie. So thank you so much for Lee, the creator of the clothing brand Pestle and Mortal. Make sure you go and check them out. Barry, obviously, I always ask my guests as well if you can remember if you remember, obviously, I'm sure you do, like we've mentioned, your first horror movie memory.
Yeah, not only did I remember the movie, I remember the year, I remember what we were doing, I remember absolutely everything about that night. And it was a nice cozy night in 1988 where myself, my dad, and my big sister, we cozied up on the couch and on the floor to watch a horror movie called Just Before Dawn from 1981. Now, it's to this day, it's still to me the best backwoods slasher movie of all time. If you haven't seen it, in fact, have you seen it?
I don't know if I have, and that's a really good question. That's a really interesting one. I will look for it afterwards
Right.
because what happens is because my brain's not very good. Especially during my teens, I watch so many that I forget until the
Yeah.
first second I put them on.
Mhm.
So what I'll do is I will look for that afterwards, and then I will watch it, and then I'll probably be like, yeah, no, I remember it now. But either way, I'll watch it. But yeah, that would be good. But yeah, so that was your one.
So it was 1988. My dad put on Just Before Dawn. Didn't know what to expect, and I was only 5 years old at the time. So we watched it, and it was a brutal film. I don't know why I let us watch it, but we watched it anyway. And that's where my love of horror began because of that night watching Just Before Dawn. But as we were young kids, me and my sister, over the course of a few years, we forgot what the movie was called, so we didn't know. So we just called it The Men Bears because it was men that were kind of big and burly that were hanging about the woods. That's all we remembered. But when the internet came around, and then I don't know if you remember the IMDb message boards, there was a section of the IMDb message boards called "I Need to Know," and it's basically people wanted to know the name of a film that they've forgotten all about. So I was on there saying, anybody remember this film about these guys that go into the woods, blah, blah, blah. And then someone said it's called Just Before Dawn. And I couldn't believe it. That was it. That was a film I was looking for since 1988. And that was a good maybe 15 years or something. I completely forgot the name of it. And as soon as I found out the name of it, I bought the DVD. And thankfully, 88 Films, the UK Blu-ray company, they released it on Blu-ray a few years ago, and I bought it, and it was a stunning, what a film. And the score was done by Brad Fiedel, who done the score for Fright Night, The Terminator and things. So the score is so eerie, and it stars Greg Henry from Slither and Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Lemmon and George Kennedy, who was in a few old-fashioned TV shows back in the day. Great cast, great acting, brilliant film. That's my very first horror film, and thanks to that, I love horror films to this day.
Yeah, and that started your journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's good because that's a recommendation for me as well. Because if I haven't seen it, then that's bloody brilliant. And if I have seen it, then I'll still keep watching it because it means that I remembered a movie once again, which happens so often. That's the problem. When you watch so many horrors and so many movies, you forget some.
Yeah.
And like yourself, like you couldn't remember the name of it, and then you knew it. And then I'm sure as soon as you put it on, everything came back to you. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, everything. And that's the power of horror. And like I said to you as well before, like that's why I do this segment your first time, because we never forget our first horror movie memory, whether it's what started us on the journey, if it's what ended the journey, and we were like, I can't watch horror movies, they scare the shit out of me, and that's fine. But we don't forget the movie that did it to us, and we don't forget the movie that started us on the journey. But I also love I love reading them. I get very nostalgic when I read them, especially if it's even about Alien, which is my first horror movie, and my second horror movie was Evil Dead, and then it just went on and went on from there. And it's great to hear yours as well, because then I can hear and watch and everything, and everybody else can hear and watch how nostalgic you got for that moment as well. So yeah, so that's cool. So everybody, if you haven't seen that movie, like me at the moment,
Check it
make
out.
sure you go and bloody watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There we go. Well, there we go. So
it.
there you go. And also 88 films, that's good as well, because it means if I remember it and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, I can get it, because finally we've got a release out of it, because they're doing some good stuff. So there we go. So that's the episode. That's everything. You get a first horror movie memory. That is us talking about everything that we love about the Monster Squad. A truly not underrated but underseen movie. This film, like we've mentioned, we don't talk to people and then they go, "Oh, this is a rubbish movie." No, everybody loves this movie who's seen it. But if you haven't seen this movie, I couldn't recommend it more. And I'm sure Barry is exactly saying we couldn't recommend this movie more, especially if you are somebody that loves the Goonies, if you love Amblin, old school Steven Spielberg, if you love things like Stranger Things. This was the foundations of what created what we have now with that incredible series that is obviously such a success. I mean, they are the modern day Monster Squad, and it's so great. It's such a great movie, but like we've mentioned, there's more to this movie than it just being a fun movie about monsters and kids trying to destroy them. There is so many intelligent and interesting layers to this movie that's why it's so worth having a discussion all about it. It's a really, and also on top of all of it, it's fucking fun as fuck.
Yep. Nothing more to add to that, to be honest. You've nailed it, to be honest, and obviously we spoke about it throughout the video. So yeah, anyone who's not seen it, see it.
Yeah, there we go. So now, Barry, now's your time, because anybody that's watching this will probably know who you are anyway. I'm sure they bloody do. But Barry, as I said, he's the creator of Wolfmans Got Nards, and among other things with that channel and so on like that. Now's your time to promote everything that you've got going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite a modest person. It's quite hard for me to promote things, to be honest. But yeah, if you don't know my channel is called Wolfman's Got Nards. Obviously, now you know it's dedicated to the Monster Squad, and I just talk about all things horror, some things non-horror as well, but mostly horror films. I do horror reviews, I do news updates, a lot of it to do with Halloween and Scream, and just the general horror stuff. I do some old-fashioned horror films, some maybe horror films that you might not have heard of that I hope that after doing a review for, you'll maybe want to see it and things. So yeah, mostly just kind of horror related. You can follow me on Instagram at Wolfman's Got Nard without the S. Somebody stole the S.
Sons of bitches.
I know. And same with Twitter as well. I'm Wolfman's Got Nard on that as well, because someone stole the S. So yeah, Wolfman's Got Nard on both of those, but mainly YouTube is my big thing, which is Wolfman's Got Nards with an S, which is cool. So yeah, you can find me over there. One thing I will say, and it connects to the Monster Squad, is I went to For the Love of Horror in Manchester a few years ago, and I met Sean and Rudy, the two main kids from the Monster Squad, which is Andre Gower and Ryan Lambert. And when I went to get my photograph with them, I was walking towards them, and Andre pointed to me and went, "I know you. I know you." I'm like, "How do you know me?" And he's like, "Wolfman's Got Nards." I'm like, "Yes, it's me from Wolfman's." I couldn't believe someone from the movie that I adored all these years recognized me. And I'm like, it was all worth it to this point.
And that's exactly, that's like the coolest fucking thing ever, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
like a movie that you cherish, that you truly love, that you created a channel and everything around. Like, that was the forefront. At the forefront. I mean, it's the name of it, and then that person knows you, knows what you created,
knows I exist.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. At least they know that you exist, but you created something around it as well. What an incredible sort of payoff that is for all the hard work and everything that you do over there. So, as Barry said, he's everywhere: Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. make sure that you go and obviously support his journey through everything that he does, as well as you do with the Let's Talk Horror channel. Let's Talk Horror channel, obviously, we have the video podcast episodes that obviously on our YouTube channel constantly. They're always coming out, well, twice a month. If you prefer to listen to them on audio, they're available on every podcast platform as well. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those sort of things. We are also on all the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. And if you do want to find out more about Patreon as well, we do have a Let's Talk Horror channel Patreon where you can get loads of cool exclusives. I'm currently working on Patreon only exclusive things, but once again, that's over there. It doesn't change anything that I'm doing with the Let's Talk Horror channel. I've never made a penny from this. I never will. But this all goes. This is just me expressing my love for horror. So all of this is always free. It always will be. But Patreon is there if you want to show your little extra support to go towards me and my journey. And anybody out there that has Patreon, is the same for them. Obviously, my Patreons at the moment are Flicks from Friends podcast. Make sure you go and check them out. Jamie Burns, Disco Doctor of Death, that's aka Disco Doctor of Death, that's the name that we figured out for him. Rob Miller and Leighton Collins, they're my honorary creeps so far. If you want to know a little bit more, go to patreon.com and search for the Let's Talk Horror channel. But listen, we're everywhere. And we're everywhere trying to do everything we can to spread the word of horror. I mean, it's out there anyway, but we're trying to do our part with talking about films like Monster Squad that we've already mentioned. Not everybody knows about, and everybody should know about, because it is for kids and adults alike. It is for all of us to enjoy the absolute shit out of, and it's for us old timers to get nostalgic for, and it's for you new timers to see for the first time and truly get inspired to go and build a den somewhere in the woods and be safe when you do that, because we live in a different time and a different world now. So maybe don't do it. Maybe just do it on Sims or something like that. I don't know. Make your own Sims Monster Squad.
In your back garden.
Yeah, in your back garden. That's it. Find the strongest tree and do it that way. Mm-hmm. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Barry, about this absolute pleasurable movie. It's such a great movie that we can speak lovingly about, because we were there at the time, growing up with it, and like so many were. And I really hope that this episode helps other people find it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Yeah, and it's a pleasure coming on and being able to talk about one of our favourite movies for almost 2 hours as well. You could talk about this film all day. But yeah, it's very special every time someone asks me to come on and talk about the Monster Squad, because it's one that I hold dear to my heart.
There we go. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Barry, for coming on. To everybody else, as I said, keep supporting Barry on his journey. Keep supporting mine, my journey through the Let's Talk Horror channel. Thank you for everybody for joining me once again in the Creep Zone. Until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.